Sorry. Had some last moment ghosts in the machine. I had to take them out behind the shed. Happy Saturday night. It's a little after 9 on Saturday, August 26th, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a little bit. There's no dearth of people who have covered this topic, but not in an ASMR way. Don't ask me what makes this ASMR. There's nothing that makes this ASMR. Except I am not going to shout at you. Depending on what you say. This was, this has been brewing forever, right? But I wanted to do something specifically for this and do a little bit of preparation, with which I was ably assisted by my partner, who is a public defender and is intimately familiar with some of the levers that get pulled to stomp on the hands that are sort of being reached out to the cliff's edge to try and pull themselves up, or that ridiculous phrase of pulling someone up by their bootstraps. Of course, that phrase was to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is nonsensical. It started as a nonsensical phrase, but then was adopted into the vernacular as actually being something that you can do. Just bootstrap it. Bootstrap yourself. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. What do you mean? Impossible. Don't you love America? You must not love America if you don't think you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Why don't you get the hell out of here? Seriously. Love is a weird word to use when talking about an arbitrary government and imaginary lines being drawn. I wouldn't say that I love America. I wouldn't even say that I love the idea of the American dream. The dream that I love is probably much more closely aligned with communism, in theory. Problem is, everybody's a piece of shit. Not just capitalists. We're all pieces of shit. And communism gives the same yokes that can be manipulated to divert power and money and services to the few. The same yokes, the same levers exist in that structure. But it does seem to me like if we were to say, let's say, just imagine that every system of government was abolished. Let's just say every system of government was completely abolished. They're gone. They're all gone. None exist. And now we have to come up with a new system of government. One of the first decisions you're going to have to make is this government going to, what is this government going to prioritize? The individual or the group? I mean, there's only one ethical way to answer that, the group. And there you have taken your first step down the road of saying, I want to be a communist. So Suck on that. Let me say hi to some people before I jump into this any further. Poliostasis. You don't think capitalism alone is to blame? Well, I don't think it's to blame alone. No, I don't think it's to blame alone. Something else that was attached to it, or another political system that makes our modern society how it is. I forget the name of it. You're just going to have to tell me. I'm not that smart. Hey, Pivy, Rose Ophelia Shepherd. Your leftist video essays and ASMR fusing didn't already have a peak with that dang dad. Don't know who that is. But whoever it is probably did a lot more prep work and knows a lot more about the subject than I do. Shareholder capitalism versus stockholder capitalism. America is shareholder. Well, hold on. Okay, yeah, no. Well, I'm not 100% clear. I think I understand the theoretical difference between a shareholder versus a stockholder. But I don't know about anything about that enough to go into it. So I'm going to stop on that. But poliostasis, thank you. You can go. Is freedom dollars an oxymoron? Holy beast. Oh my God. Yes, I'm on. Yeah, I got to make y'all wait. I got to give the 10 minutes. No, I literally, like, things started failing right as I was about to go live. Everything fell apart. And I used to do this every week. For a long time, I did this every week. And it was a sort of a well-oiled machine. And now it is a creaky machine. But it is still a machine. And we will get to the point. I promise. Do not fall asleep if you're driving. There's nothing like money, especially money that makes such lovely sounds. Hey, Maddie. No, I'll tell you, the last video I did, last official video I did was of Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood. And I was doing Daniel Plainview, and I'm telling you, it was very difficult for me not to scream at the end of it that I abandoned my child. But I just said it. I said, I abandoned my child. But what I wanted to do was scream it at the top of my lungs. And I actually did it, and it was cathartic. It was cathartic to scream. It's especially cathartic, I think, to scream, I abandoned my child. I abandoned my boy, over and over again. To keep screaming that until you lose your voice, basically. No, Eric, that's very kind. Wait till I'm done, though. Maybe you won't. Perhaps I'm not extremist enough for you. It is really, really upsetting to me. I shouldn't get this upset by this, but I do watch a good amount of reaction videos, and it's really upsetting to me how many of them are right-wing or alt-right or just suckers for, Fresh and Fit and Jordan Peterson, absolute. Some of this may be ignorance, right? So I'm trying to give some benefit of the doubt to some of these people, right? I'm trying to imagine a state of mind wherein I'm very young and I am not that worldly yet. And I watch a video of Jordan Peterson and I think he makes sense. I don't think I have the capability to empathize with to say nothing of Jordan Peterson. I don't think I have the ability to empathize with a person who empathizes with Jordan Peterson, it's very difficult for me to put myself in that situation. So it's depressing to me to see basically like a lot of these. It seems to me, and this is anecdotal, so I'm going to be like a politician here and tell anecdotes. It seems to me like a lot of like the niche YouTubers who have found a good amount of success doing whatever it is they're doing, whether it's teaching guitar or doing movie reviews or whatever it is, right? Seems like a good amount of those people are libertarians. And a good amount of those people believe that they did pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. A good amount of those people think that they are where they are due to merit alone, or predominantly merit. Maybe not even completely merit, but predominantly merit. And that is like the height of naivete and sort of the height. It's the height of a few things. It's the height of narcissism. It's the height of naivete. It's the height of feeling like it's the, you know what it is? It's the, and I'm going to offend a lot of people right now. Somebody here really just said, have I read anything by Karl Marx? Really? Flow Rider? Yeah, I fucking read Karl Marx. It's the height. Let me finish my thought. I'm sorry. Of course I have. You think I'm talking about this and I don't know? I haven't read Engels and Marx. It is the height of somebody who will very confidently walk into a tattoo shop, a tattoo parlor, and get a tattoo of the name of their significant other who they've been dating for 3 weeks. It's that kind of naivete. So if you're the kind of person who really, really would sort of, you don't have the foresight to kind of look more than a month or two in the future, or a season seems like a really long time to you. Don't know what to say. Become a React YouTuber. If you get really successful, you can just be like, wow, American dream. I did it with no help from anybody. Did it on my own. And you can too. All you have to do if you want to make it in America is you just need to want it hard enough. And if you're not making it, then you're not wanting it hard enough. So want it harder. Start today. Want that shit. So no, I don't believe in the American dream. I believe that almost every mechanism that has been, especially in the last 50 to 100 years, which you might say, well, what about slavery? Slavery's gone. Like, we've gotten better. No, we've become more insidious. We've become much more sneaky and Machiavellian in how we manipulate our populace and how we take advantage of the disenfranchised. And that, by and large, is still mostly still Black people. So before you say, like, we've evolved as a society, I think we've evolved to be, excuse me, much less bald-faced, much more under the table. And the mechanisms, a lot of which have been created in the last 100 years or so, are extremely good at, this is old, everybody knows this, right? Like, we talk about the criminal justice system and people say it's broken. Anyone who has worked in the criminal justice system or who has studied it for any amount of time will say, no, the criminal justice system is working exactly as intended. It is institutionalized slavery. And it's a giant profit machine. So what we want to do, right? What are the things that when I say we, now I'm talking about like from the perspective of, uh, let's be reductionist, like, because I feel like it's hard to talk about this stuff if we're just kind of constantly, or it's going to be hard for me to talk about this if we're constantly referring to some shadowy, um, just, I'm not saying that this doesn't exist, because maybe this does exist, but I don't want to refer to it as like a shadowy conclave that, controls things behind the scenes. Like, I'm literally just talking about, like, you know, some of these mechanisms when we're talking about like parking tickets, maybe these were thought up by the Secretary of Transportation, right? Or, or somebody who worked at the Department of Transportation, right? But it's a revolving door, obviously, right? And different people, but as I mentioned earlier, right, there's one thing we can count on when we're talking about people, especially people in positions of power, and that is that they will generally behave the same way, especially those, there's a selection bias when we're talking about like the kinds of people who would want to do this kind of work. Um, but I don't want to, no, you know what? Let's just say the shadowy conclave. But I don't believe there is like a shadow government doing this. There might be. I'm not saying there's not, but I do believe that this is actually done through the sort of natural progression of like, it's out there in the open. You want to find out who's doing it, go to your .gov website and look at who the current directors are, right? They're the people doing it. Now, historically, they're not the people doing it because, as I mentioned, revolving door, etc. But I need a shorthand way to refer to them. So I will say the shadowy conclave. Let's see let me go down here a little bit. Amy, hey, Amy. Pivy, KH, don't know who that is. Blarg65, probably the best push notification title YT has ever sent me. Oh, I'm going to lose a lot of subscribers here. It's fine. Pretentious Fly, oh, that is kind. And Blarg65, you are correct. YouTube really what YouTube rewards, I don't know that YouTube rewards right radicalization. What they reward is, in my opinion, what they reward are controversial, extremist views that are not yet verboten. Not yet verboten. So edgelords, right? And yeah, I guess those tend to be right wing, and right wing. And they tend to be more obsessed with money for me, not for thee, and they tend to make more money, and therefore it feeds into itself. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Because this is the beast feeding itself, right? I feel like I'm about 20 minutes behind here in the comments. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So people are talking about Jordan Peterson here. So obviously I'm way behind. Let me go down to the bottom. He does. He's a moron. He has lost the plot. Like where he was once just innocuous and silly, now he is despicable and actively evil. And can you imagine if he was your psychologist? He's so fond of talking about his anecdotes are always, in my clinical psychologist, I've been a clinical psychologist for 20 years. I've seen patients for 20 years and I see this. Man, you don't see this stuff, but I see it every day. I see it every day. Don't you fucking cross me, motherfucker. I'll put on my mean face. Can you imagine being one of his patients? Imagine now, like imagine you were his patient for 5 years and maybe you think that he helped you. And now, like, do you look back on everything and just like, oh man, that's all. That was all. I gotta go through reprogramming. I gotta go through the same re-education that he has to if he wants to keep his license, which I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck about keeping his license. Ben Shapiro pays his bills now. Okay, what is this? Yes, right. Yep. Target low self-esteem teens. Yeah. And the whole equality of outcomes when it comes to partners, right? All right, I'm going to get down to the bottom because I want to get started. I have not even started yet. I have a document. And I have exhibits. I have scatter plot graphs. Exactly, Steve. I apologize, Pivy. Okay, I'm down to the bottom here. So let's talk about this. Let's jump right into it. Now, almost 30 minutes in. Look, somebody thumbs down to this video. I wish that person would speak up. I'd love to engage in like talking about the other side of this. You know, surely there's another side to this, isn't there? Is there? I like this blurg. Very funny. Yes. He's talking about Kropotkin's Conquest of Bread there. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Oh, hey, trouser mouse. Okay, so I guess here's the way. Here's the way I'm going to go about doing this. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, this is like fact. Okay, I see very little wiggle room. This cannot possibly be a convergent evolution or a confluence of identical events happening across all levels of government in all of the systems that I'm about to get into, that all just coincidentally seem to do the same thing. Like this is very planned and very manufactured. It is in the best interest of the shadowy conclave to have a very large, poor working class. They'll talk a lot about needing, you'll hear liberals and neoliberals say this stuff, say they need a strong middle class. I feel like, we grease the wheels with the blood of the lower class. Oh, I got 2 thumbs down. Somebody, who's thumbs down? Talk, say something. Let's talk about your thumbs down. I feel like it's the lower class, right? And the data bears that out. How so, you may ask? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But why? Why does that work, right? Like we saw the idea of the American dream. We saw the idea of if you work hard enough, you can get yourself out of poverty and you can be one of the few. And we do things like, we endorse a state national lottery so that we can hold up these people and be like, look, you too can break out of your dire living situation. You have hope. You have hope. Even if you're not a a rich man north of Richmond. There's hope for you if you just keep sticking it out. Like you must hate your job, and you're not getting compensated, and you're the CEO of wherever you work makes 400 times whatever you work, and the wealth disparity between the poor and the rich is getting more and more disparate every year, right? But it's okay, because you might win the lottery, or you might start a YouTube channel that gets millions of subscribers, and you might get rich. And if you do that, we're gonna hold you up as an example, because it doesn't work if the poor actually revolt. You know, we don't want France. Right. This is probably why I didn't really want to use the phrase like a shadowy conclave, but I'm just doing it for shorthand. You know what I'm talking about. If I say shadowy conclave, I just mean the fucking officious bureaucrats who happen to be occupying positions of where they can affect policy right now. Right. What political party would I align with the most? Democratic Socialist. Probably. I mean, in practical terms, Democratic Socialist. Yeah, DB, right? But there's hope, right? There's like a little thread of hope that you might do it for them. You might be the first of your family, for instance, who, I mean, it sounds almost quaint talking about going to college. Like, who gives a fuck about college anymore at this point? But it is on the list. Oh, DB, I have not seen this, but that would be, first of all, not shocking at all. I think we do have mechanisms by which we can cover that shit up a lot better than maybe the French could. So we could probably withstand that. Like, I think we have the lethargy and the, I guess, inertia within our populace, because we do various things to promote that inertia that maybe France was not as good at or didn't know about yet. Like, this is 2.0. We can push it further. We can do more. We can get more out of the lower class before they break. We can have more. We'd have a few more billionaires and have that disparity be even higher and higher. So keep the poor poor. The exceptions to the rule are precisely there to serve as incentives that, realistically speaking, like, these are statistically insignificant. If you are poor, you're going to stay poor. If you are rich, you may become poor, but social mobility is by and large a sham, right? Oh, sleep. Bruh, capitalism is the only system on earth you can go from poverty to wealthy. Okay, so you have been sold a lie. You've been sold a lie. Because if there are, let's just like take as a blanket example, I think I know where one of the thumbs down came from. Utopias aren't real. Huh. Fuck. I think they're right. Shit. Oh, man. That's it. The wind just came out of my sails. One well-aimed shot from Sleep is the Cousin of Death, and I have lost all my conviction. it is clear that the person who started their sentence with bruh can lecture me on capitalism being the only system on earth where you can go from being poor to being rich. So I'm not denying that under capitalism, you can't go from being poor to being rich. You can. You can. And if you do that, you are the statistical anomaly. And democratic socialism is still capitalism. So when I talk about, maybe you caught the beginning and you heard me talking about communism and you were like, oh man, this guy's a communist. I am a philosophical communist. Whereas in the thought experiment that I mentioned before, if we started from zero, you prioritize the group over prioritizing the individual. Bam. Please say hi to my BF Edward. He's going through a lot right now and you make him happy. I'm like a dad to your boyfriend Edward. Hi, Edward. Clean your room. To quote Jordan Peterson. Seriously though, if I should not be the father figure to anyone. I'm no good at that. I am welcoming a new child. As a friend of mine called me, I am the worst antinatalist on the planet. Welcoming a child in the next month, next week maybe. Don't know. It's happening though. Here's to it. I'm excited, but I'm scared. And I don't like the world that we're bringing children into. Yeah, exactly. Right. So other people are getting this for me, right? It is sort of like Ursula Le Guin's The Ones Who Turn Away from Home Loss. All right. Well, we should not be aspiring for a system in which there are a 0.01% of rich people and 73% living at or 56% living at or below the poverty line. We should be, well, see, here it is. Here it is, Poke Kid 1, right? I don't think any system of government is going to be great. I just think we can do better than what we have now. Anyway, let me get to this thing, or we're never gonna get there. There is here's another thing that I hear like from these React people, and yeah, you're right here, Black. Yeah, it is difficult to justify bringing kids into the world. I do consider myself a negative utilitarianist, and that means do no harm. And any living being that you bring into the world is going to suffer more than they are going to be happy or joyful. Joyful is not the right word. Happy. See, I think it's realism. But anyway, I'm gonna get so off the point if I don't get started here. There's a few things, okay? The idea of like think globally, act locally. All right, that is a bugaboo. And just imagine everything that I'm saying right now that I am saying before I say it, I'm saying in my opinion. Okay. So think globally, act locally. That's a bugaboo. The idea that globalism is bad is a bugaboo. The idea that as long as you're doing something for your community and you are helping your community, that makes you a good person. It doesn't, man. I mean, the very mechanisms that we'll be talking about here have essentially put us all in our own red-lined bubble of people like us. So by saying that I am helping my neighbor, unless you consider the world, everyone in the world, your neighbor, you are being selectivist and, I'm just going to say it, passively racist. Now, some of you might say, well, I live in a neighborhood that's very diverse. Okay, good for you. I'm happy for you. I'm glad. It's probably a much better neighborhood. Most people don't. And that's borne out by some of the data I'm going to show you here. So think globally, act locally, right? This, what is it, this thing here? Over a little bit. That's a bunch of bullshit. Think globally, act globally. And don't pat yourself on the back for acting locally and thinking that you are somehow doing, like, don't take the serenity prayer as your milk of the poppy, to put it in a more sort of common parlance, and think that you're doing something that you're not. We already talked about the idea that pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is an absurd idea. We've somehow like gotten to the point where we've sort of put it on the level of like hoist by your own petard, which makes sense. But pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, that doesn't make any sense, right? The idea that equality and equity are not the same. So let me preface this with a little bit of yimmer yammer. I am not preaching equality of outcome. I am preaching equality and equity of opportunity. I shouldn't say equality of opportunity, equity of opportunity. Okay? Very, very well demonstrated by this, right? Anyone who is successful in life and looks back on their life, and again, there are outliers. I'm not including the outliers, and I'm referring to officious bureaucrats as a shadowy conclave. I'm making some reductionist statements here for the purposes of trying to get through this in an hour or two. Yeah, DB, this is kind of what I'm saying is just like don't kid yourself, right? But anyway, so equality means everybody gets the same. Everybody's the same, right? We gave you the same thing we gave them, so why didn't you succeed, right? And equity recognizes the differences inherent in socioeconomic and racially diverse groups and the different needs that those people have, and accommodates each according to their need, right? Now, you can be provided with the exact same resources, or you can be provided with equitable resources and still mess up and still end up, it's still a roll of the dice. So I'm not talking about equality of outcome. I am talking about equity. We don't do it. We don't do that at all. In fact, we do the opposite. People think that like the majority of taxes, people think taxes like in America are generally progressive, but they are generally regressive. And we'll get to that too. All right. I gotta. I'm a white savior who thinks I gotta save black people? No, that's not what I said at all. What makes you think that? What makes you think that? Do you not think that black people are more historically disenfranchised than white people in America? I don't want this to be just a conversation between me and you. Sleep is the cousin of death. Hmm? Can you answer that question? While you're answering that question, I will move on. Oh, I'm getting there, Exodia. I'm getting here. So, what are the different ways in which capitalism generally, and let's focus in a little more and just say in the United States, how we punish the poor? I've just like written a lot of these from the top of my head. And like I said, some of these I worked on with my partner, who was a public defender in the Bronx. A lot of them just like, as you start writing the list and then you start going into the data behind all of this, it becomes pretty crazy how long the list gets and how quickly. So let's start with taxation, okay? I don't believe that taxation is theft. I think that taxes need to exist. I'm not preaching the abolishment of taxes. I think our tax code is pretty reprehensible and sets itself up in a way where it purports to say tax the wealthy more than the poor, i.e. is progressive, but is in fact in a lot of cases regressive in practice. People talk about how communism sucks in practice, but is great in theory. Things like a flat tax are maybe great in theory. That's equality, not equity, because $1 to a multimillionaire is not the same as $1 to somebody who makes $40,000 a year. So flat taxes, the idea of a flat tax that's generally regressive. So for instance, like sales tax, right? Sales tax is a flat tax, like in Florida, right? Like there is a flat sales tax in Florida. That disproportionately affects the poor because you're saying the same percentage of the same things. There are certain goods that all humans need, regardless of if they are rich or if they are poor. And if you apply the same flat tax to these goods, then you are punishing the poor person more than the rich person. Got any dissenters on that? No, again, you're wrong. Sleep is the cousin of death. And speak from the heart. Speak from the heart. Don't be disingenuous here. Okay? I'm not talking about discrimination in any way. This is not discrimination. Going for equity is not discrimination. So, like, if you're going to talk about this with me, at least have the decency to not be disingenuous about it. Think about what you're saying before you say it. Hey, Hiver, how are you doing? Bro, we understand flat taxes. I'm going through a whole bunch of shit here, Vicar Brader. Yeah, I can get to this too. You're not paying very good attention, but that's fine. Okay, let's move on to some other examples of taxes that are either flat or can be skirted by the wealthy. So state and local taxes, right? SALT taxes. These are deductions that can be taken, and they're generally taken. It's weird because, when you look at even what like Trump did when he was in office, right? He passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which on the face of it, it put a cap on some of these deductions, like these individual deductions. And one might like look at that initially and say, well, that seems like a move towards more equitable taxation. But what that actually does, and if you look at I'm happy to bring up the code, but you can just look up Tax Cuts and Jobs Act here. In fact, I'm going to bring it up real quick. What it actually does is it disenfranchises citizens and prioritizes businesses and allows businesses and businessmen to write off a whole bunch of shit that private citizens can't do. So that is a regressive tax. Let's talk about mortgages. Who can afford mortgages? Especially now. Can poor people afford to buy houses? No, they're rent locked. Rich people can afford to buy houses. And when you buy a house, you can deduct the mortgage interest on that house. This is a major tax break for the wealthy. Major. It's worth mentioning again here. Right now we're talking about ways in which the tax code is inequitable. That is another way in which the tax code is inequitable. The very idea of itemization and itemization requiring you to meet a standard deduction, that is a regressive policy. Why do I need to meet a standard deduction to itemize? Why is there a cap on anyone's contribution to FICA, Social Security? Why is that capped? It's capped in 2023. It's capped at $160,000. That went up. It was actually capped lower than that in the years prior, but it's capped now at $160,000. So if you make more than $160,000 a year, your contributions to Social Security stop at $160,000. So if you're a millionaire, you stop contributing after, say, January, the end of January, maybe mid-February. Your paycheck gets bigger. Not that you care that much about your paycheck, right? Okay, wait, I want to be sure. What does this mean? Kit, you look like such a liberal. And take that as a compliment? Like I assume what we have here are some mini Tates. Some mini Tates, mini Petersons, mini Shapiros in here. No, KH. That would be covered by something like a luxury tax or something, right? I'm talking about essential goods and services, which still get hit by the same sales tax that everything else does. So, taxes. I thought I had changed this. Hold on a second. I might have not put this in the right order. This might not be in the right order. Let's move on to another way in which capitalism punishes poverty, criminalizes poverty, in fact. Fees. Late fees, overdraft fees, tickets, penalties on late fees, requiring things like registration. Lots of things fall into this category, right? Overdraft. I said overdraft fees, didn't I? Right. The credit score system works into this as well. It's difficult to get a credit card with a decent APR if you don't have a good credit score. It's difficult to get a good credit score if you're constantly underwater. There is a direct correlation between subprime lending and your zip code. In fact, it's very interesting. Like one of the most accurate predictors. Like people think of this like when they talk about personal data and data that is not data that say is personal, but maybe doesn't really tell you very much about a person. Most people would not consider their zip code to be that telling of a piece of data, but it's actually incredibly predictive of a lot of things, from how much money you're going to make to how long you're going to live to what your odds are of being killed by a police officer. Subprime lending just has a really large geographical component, and where you live is largely dictated by the amount of money that you make. And that geographical component, unsurprisingly for subprime lending, is largely urban. Let's see, got that here somewhere. Bam. Highly subprime zip codes tend to be high density urban areas. So population density and percent of people that are subprime, you can see in this scatter plot graph. And it's pretty clear. 50% of when you get up to 50% subprime, you're looking at living densities of 5 to 20,000 per square mile. So urban areas, right? You get a parking ticket. You get a parking ticket for $30. This varies from state to state. But in many states, the late fee for that parking ticket, let's say you have to wait for your next paycheck in order for you to pay that parking ticket. The late fee will be 200% the actual cost of the parking ticket. So your $30 parking ticket has now gone up to $90. Sometimes more. A lot of times, like the late fee will just be like $100. And you get yourself into one of those kind of situations where it's like, well, I just can't fucking pay it. And then what happens is you lose your license. And you can lose your license for a shit ton of things. And the number of people driving with suspended licenses, look at this. So this is, so I live outside of DC, so I am talking about DC here, but it's not that different. You can get your driver's license suspended for certain violations. They're not all moving violations. Okay. And if you get caught driving with a suspended license, a fine of up to $1,000 and a year in prison. You're in prison, which of course means you lose your job and your ability to pay any of those fines. You spend that year in prison making money for either the private prison owners or the government, right? And they certainly don't make it easy to reinstate that. Let's talk about education and the gatekeeping involved in education. Although, like, I will say this, education has become more and more democratized as time goes on. It's more, if we want to talk about like shadowy conclaves, education really is kind of more of about who you know, can you get to skull and bones, and then can your skull and bones colleague get you that job that they got from their dad or mom after you graduate. Just keeping that club mentality going. Again, so much of this comes down to geography. Your access to your schools, largely geographic, largely socioeconomic. Knowledge, that's become a little more democratized. I look, if you meet a certain threshold where you can, you have an internet connection, you have the drive, you have the will to do this. Access to knowledge is a lot more democratized now than it used to be. Certainly not Library of Alexandria levels of exclusivity going on there. But it's not just about what you know, right? It's who you know. It's how you've learned to work with people. It's who you have integrated with and who you are now, say, buddies with. Not to mention the fact that although we are forgiving student loan debt is an albatross of the highest power, right? When you have access to better schools, you have access to better extracurricular activities, more socialization. You put yourself in a better position upon graduation to succeed in life. You get a lot more chances. And that's another thing is it is certainly true that, it is possibly true that if you are disenfranchised, you might get a chance. You might get a shot. It's not likely, but you might. But you're just going to get that one shot. You're not going to get the ability to, say, bankrupt 6 or 7 businesses and still somehow be considered an erudite and fantastic and successful businessman. So successful, in fact, that you leverage that into becoming President of the United States. This is not at all what I'm saying, Vicar Brader. I am calling out the broad, and this is broad strokes speaking, disenfranchisement of races. I'm not saying that we don't need similar levels of help in, say, Appalachia or wherever those other communities exist. Not saying that. Oh, is this what we're doing here? Wow. Okay, well, first of all, it's affect with an A. No. Equity is recognizing. Do I need to explain what equity is? It's recognizing the differences in that exist currently in our society right now and doing the right thing and making up for those differences. Let's see. Okay. I feel like I'm parroting racism without racists. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So I am happy for your mom, and I think that that's great, right? But these are the exact kinds of outliers that then breed the belief that what stands between you and success is your will to get things done. And that is not what stands between you and success. Exactly, DB. All right, I got to go down to the bottom here. Yeah, I agree with this Matt post. Yeah, correct. Steve the Wizard. Sam B, bullshit. 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 Capitalism absolutely punishes the poor. I'm just giving you like 50 ways. I'm going to give you 50 more. Okay, let me get down to the bottom here. I'm gonna ignore some of these people. Let's keep going. Going to the bottom here. All right. So the gatekeeping process that is education, done. Let's get into housing, which we already have gotten into housing quite a bit, but we can continue to get into housing. Some of this I've mentioned before. A lot of these, right, these are Venn diagrams. They're going to intersect a lot. So we talked about some of this, right? Home loans require credit scores, high income. Banks are allowed to look at things like your marriage status. They're allowed to look at how much you make. There are a lot of things that they do to determine whether or not they're going to lend you money. And if they decide to lend you money and you don't fall into their upmarket bracket, they're going to juke the APR or give you like a variable APR that will end up, has a much better chance of, or say a balloon payment mortgage, has a much better chance of blowing up in your face, which causes you to lose your home. Who do you lose your home to? Back to the bank, who then sells that home again. It's great for them. So these are look, where you live. Maybe if we were like trying to get back to the root of this, like there's a few things, but I mean, where you live is determined in part, in no small part, by how much money you make. But where you live determines so much. It determines how healthy you are. It determines how good the drinking water is that you have. It determines whether or not you live near downriver of a tannery that's putting shit into your water, right? It determines what schools you have access to. It determines how good the hospitals are that are near you, which then totally explains things like the mortality rates for COVID, or we don't even have to go to COVID. We don't even have to bring COVID into this. We can look at birth rates. We can look at pneumonia. We can look at heart attack deaths. Lead. Public housing is atrocious. We allow indefinite detention of homeless people. You get into a situation where you can't buy and you just have to rent. There are states that can put you in jail. It can put you in jail if you fail to pay your rent. Arkansas. As if you couldn't guess that it was Arkansas that I was talking about. Like if I say there are states that could do this crazy thing, odds are Florida, maybe Texas, Arkansas, the usual suspects hitting that shit. But imagine that, right? Imagine being able to be put in jail for missing a rent payment. What does that do? Like, we'll get to this when we talk about like the penal system, right? The penal system originally, like the stated goal of the penal system is reform. It's not supposed to be, at least it was not supposed to be punitive. It was supposed to be reformist, which it's not. But then in what way is throwing someone in jail for not paying their rent reformist? It creates this spiral situation by which then the person essentially being one paycheck away between being homeless and having a home, they're sent to prison, lose their home, they get out. What kind of support programs do we have for people getting out of prison? Jack squat. So we're exacerbating the problem. When people talk about like not wanting to waste money on social programs, you don't want to pay for the fudge rounds of some person weighing 350 pounds. My tax dollars shouldn't go to paying that damn welfare. That guy, Oliver Anthony, by the way, has come out and said that he was pointedly referring to politicians of all stripes, and particularly the politicians who partook in the Republican debate last week. But he's still a piece of shit. He's just kind of grabbing on to bits of ideology. If you're working class and you're mad at welfare, you're mad at social programs, social safety nets designed to save people from the worst possible outcome that they could have, your anger is just so grossly misplaced. Like, you are angry at the wrong people. You're angry at the wrong people. The idea that you have to, like, if you want to rent a place, you have to come up with things like first, last, and security, right? That's very, very difficult to do. Most people can't do it. And there aren't a lot of rights when it comes to, say, getting your security deposit back. It's very, very easy for a landlord or a homeowner, whatever it is, to fixate on very small issues, kind of, wear and tear, natural wear and tear that would happen when you live in a place for a few years, and inflate the costs of those repairs and basically just keep your security deposit. Or something might happen that they have covered by insurance, and they might still take that out of your security deposit, even though on their end, it's getting paid for by insurance. I'm not sure about this, Steve the Wizard. His last couple of interviews have not been have been sort of almost sounding a little bit leftist. Certainly not like he said diversity is our strength. I don't think that anyone in the alt-right would like to hear that being stated by their champion. So, right, and then when we're talking about where you live, all of this is affected. Your safety is affected. As I mentioned before, like your odds of getting a welfare check that turns into an assassination by a police officer goes up drastically. You may live in a food desert, if you're familiar with food deserts. Let's see. I think I have that here. Yeah. Look at this. Look at these food deserts. Food deserts are basically places where it is very difficult, or it is more difficult to get the staples, food staples, it costs more, and that cost is then passed on to the consumer than other areas. So if you live in one of these food deserts, it becomes much harder and much more expensive for you to just get adequate nutrition. And this is from, you see where it's from on the bottom there. redlining, your vote will cease to matter. You will get these insanely drawn electoral maps that look like the just craziest jigsaw puzzle piece you can imagine in order to get, I know I have this somewhere. There's a good explanation of why this is an explanation of why the Electoral College needs to go away. Right. If I can get my mouse to work. See if this image is still as well. Oh, there's a much simpler image I was trying to find here. Basically, just it demonstrates that winning the popular vote. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This may come in very big. No, perfect. So you can, through redlining, you can have a sizable majority of the popular vote and still lose because of the way districting is done. This practice is part and parcel with the conservative movement because it's the only way that they can secure any kind of seats anywhere. Because if it just came down to a popular vote, when is the last presidential election that a Republican won the popular vote? Y'all know? Y'all know when it was? Wasn't Trump. Wasn't George Bush. It was Ronald Reagan. Who talk about a devil. There you go. Nobody on the left ever wants to talk about crime. They only make excuses for crime. Well, understanding the actual underlying causes for crime, that is talking about crime, rather than just pointing the blame at people. Although if you wanted to point the blame, it's the gun, stupid. But let's keep going here because we still haven't gotten to one of the, or if not the most nefarious way in which we keep the heel of our near authoritarian boot firmly affixed to the back of the neck of the poor, and that is through the legal system, of course. So the same problems that apply to every other subject we just mentioned, like when it comes to education, housing, penalties and fees, taxes, all of that, a lot of that is determined by geographic location. Legal system also determined or is also affected by that. This one is so over the top that it really kind of speaks for itself. When you look at the rates through, and these are not rates by like some liberal organization that went in there and tried to make it look like we're incarcerating people we shouldn't be incarcerating. These are straight up. In fact, wait, let me bring them up. This is the American Bar Association. American Bar Association. The way we do crime stats, as most people know, is we arrest somebody. Maybe a 17-year-old kid. 17-year-old kid. He didn't do anything. But he was outside and he was walking around and he didn't have any ID because do you need ID to just be walking around? If you're not driving, do you need ID? And in some states you do. You do need an ID. That ID costs money. If you don't have the money to get the ID, you don't have the ID. But it doesn't need to be that. I mean, that's a really, compared to like some of the other pretexts for bringing someone in, it can just be something like, well, match the description of the suspect. Description of the suspect, 5'11", black male. Hispanic male, whatever. White male, fine, right? Match the description, they get hauled in to jail. They didn't do shit. But being young and naive, like kind of like sleep is the cousin of death is, they are browbeaten into taking a plea deal. And it would go something like this. Something like, all right, look, I'm going to level with you here. I'm on your side on this. Like, I don't think you're the guy. I don't think you are, but we gotta get somebody on this, right? It's gotta look good for the public. We don't want the public, we don't want everybody going into mass panic. We gotta get this guy. And the truth is, if this went to trial, you're looking at 10 to 20 years minimum. If you accept this deal now, you could be out 9 months. 9 months. So at that point, you have to do the math in your head, and you likely have friends who have been in a similar situation, and you likely know people who have gone away for a long time. Or maybe you've watched TV and you've seen the way this works. You're going to take the plea deal. And once you take the plea deal, you have a conviction on your record. 1. 2, you're in jail. In any given year, 98% of criminal cases in the federal courts end with a plea bargain. Now, this is according to the American Bar Association, a practice that admittedly prizes efficiency over fairness and innocence. Okay? Let me check this out for a second, because there's another interesting tidbit here. Once again, from the American Bar Association itself. Pennsylvania, Texas, New York, they have trial rates of less than 3%. Less than 3% of cases go to trial. They're all pled out as a way to save money and promote more of a certainty of outcome. So these deals exacerbate racial inequality, with black defendants often more subject to prosecutors' stacking of multiple charges in drug and gun cases. So, there are some really interesting laws whereby if I'm in a car with 4 other people, it's not my car. Let's say my friend picked me up. My friend has a gun. I don't know that my friend has a gun. It's not my car. It's not my gun. I am equally culpable to my friend who actually has the gun and knows about the gun if a crime is committed with that gun. So don't fucking tell me that it's not who you're hanging out with, right? Which a lot has to do with where you live, what your socioeconomic status is. On top of that, that's just like a ridiculous law. Like, I understand there has to, the getaway driver has to face some culpability there, but that's kind of going overboard. But stacking charges would be, throwing just coming up with like a list of charges that all come from this one offense, essentially. I mean, essentially at the center of it is one offense, but you can create a list of offenses that come from that one offense and throw them all out and say like, look, we're going to throw all of these out, throw all these other charges out, and you're going to just plea down to possession of an illegal firearm. It's a pretty good deal. Getting rid of all these other charges. But you didn't do it. You didn't do shit. You didn't do shit. And now you're going to do jail time. You're going to have a conviction on your record. You're going to lose your job. You're going to get kicked out. If you're paying for an apartment, you're going to get kicked out of your apartment. You're no longer going to have a place to live. You're not going to have any support system apart from your own family when you get out of prison. This is a self-perpetuating process. You come out in a position far more likely to fall victim to recidivism. And it's very easy for someone on the outside to say like, well, they just didn't have the integrity. They didn't have the integrity to not commit a crime. All right, what if their crime was stealing a loaf of bread? Right? The 3 strikes law in California, like there are so many unethical laws on the books at this point that it's basically like a pick and mix for prosecutors. It's shameful. It's even more interesting, I think, when you look at stuff like the Innocence Project, right? Which the Innocence Project, they investigate convicted criminals. And they go after, a lot of times they'll go after stuff like, well, this person was convicted prior to the existence of DNA evidence. Now that there is DNA evidence, we can go back and take another look at this case, and we can know to a certainty, far more certain than, say, fingerprints, if this person actually committed the crime that they either pled to or they were convicted of. And if you look at that, you can see the list here, this list of exonerations in the United States of people who pled guilty to a crime, but it was proven that they could not have committed that crime. So this is from the Innocence Project, right? Which I encourage you all to go to theinnocenceproject.org or donate to the Innocence Project. 1989, the very first DNA exoneration took place. So there have been 375 DNA exonerees to date. The average number of years served for each of these people who were exonerated, 14 years. The total number of years served, over 5,000. Over 5,000 years served by people who were proven by this one lone organization, the Innocence Project, were proven by this one lone organization that they did not commit the crime. 21 of those people were on death row. The average age at conviction was 26. The average age at exoneration was 43. There you go. 15, 16 years, 17 years of your life. Because you looked like the suspect, right? Of the 375 people that have been exonerated, 44% of them pled guilty. So more than 10% of them actually pled guilty to crimes they did not commit. And 69% of them involved eyewitness misidentification. So eyewitnesses who said, that's the guy, that's the girl, that's the guy. 70% of these cases had misidentifications in them. Eyewitness testimony should be thrown out. Like, eyewitness testimony is horrible. Oh, yeah. So I didn't look at these, but wow. 27% involved misidentification through the use of a composite sketch. That's actually not very surprising. Oh my God. 2% involved I'm sorry for laughing at this. This is not funny. But 2% involved in misidentification through hypnosis. When the hell did that happen? Uh, 84% misidentification involving a surviving victim. Fucking ridiculous. 29% involved false confessions. It's really sad. It's really sad. And it's not just like criminal cases, right? Like things like divorce, like that's super, super expensive. And it happens a lot. And by the way, and I'm not, I think that everybody should, pay child support. But if you don't pay child support, that's another mechanism by which your driver's license can be revoked. So a lot of people misunderstand like how child support works, and it varies from state to state, but it's generally not like a case where one party can say, well, I'm good. Like I have this child, I can take care of this child. I don't need child support. No, it's not about that. The state decides that. The parents don't decide that. The states decide that because this money is for the child. It is not for the custodial parent necessarily. Right? That's sort of the justification there. So, which is not to say that like if a mother is a multimillionaire and the father doesn't have a job, that the father then has to pay a bunch of child support and then can have their driver's license revoked. But there are tons of cases where stuff like that happens. And there are also tons of cases of deadbeat dads who deserve some kind of punishment and some kind of way to recoup some of that lost income. But you take away someone's driver's license, they can't work unless they're working down the street, or at least they happen to live in one of the few areas where public transportation is reliable. It's the exception. Again, it's exception. Debtors' prisons still exist. Child support's one example of that, but taxes, probation, bail, failure to repay your bail. You can literally like pay bail, get out of prison, fail to repay your bail bondsman on time, and then just get thrown right back into prison. Not to mention the fact that most of these bail bondsmen, that's for profit. That's a for-profit organization. Not to mention the prison is also a for-profit organization. It's essentially indentured servitude, free labor, paying pennies to the incarcerated who, if we're following the thread here, is likely, or certainly very possibly, not guilty of whatever it is they were accused of, because we need to keep, what's the percentage of our population that we keep in jail? Do you think there's another company, or another country, maybe an authoritarian country, that maybe incarcerates more of their own citizens than the U.S. does? I wonder if that's the case. And if we don't, like, why are there differences in very specific cases that target the poor versus the wealthy? Like, look at the crack cocaine versus just cocaine, right? The penalty for crack cocaine far more severe than the penalty for, the regular good stuff. Why? Why is that the case? In what way is that not socioeconomically motivated? Keep our poor poor. Once you get a felony conviction, you can't vote. if you weren't redlined out of an area where it's worth voting anyway. And if you want to vote, got to have a voter's ID, which isn't free, which doesn't make sense. Let's talk about health. Let's keep going. I'm got more. So this study from the National Institutes of Health, life expectancy increases continuously with income. At the age of 40 years, the gap in life expectancy between individuals in the top and bottom 1% of the income distribution in the United States is 15 years for men and 10 years for women. And that makes sense, right? Because we don't have nationalized health care. Health care is privatized. You can pay to stay alive, essentially, longer. Maybe someone's going to say, oh, no, you can die. Rich people die all the time, especially from fentanyl, propofol. Again, talking about the shadowy conclave, the majority of cases, not the outliers. What other ways, in what other ways do we criminalize poverty when it comes to healthcare, or punish the poor when it comes to healthcare? What about abortion access? If I'm poor, especially now, it might be very, very difficult for me to cross state lines to get to where I need to get to if I need to terminate a pregnancy. And what does that mean? Well, I mean, realistically, what it means is I may get it done in a back alley abortion, right? And risk my life, risk, essentially torturing. Well, that doesn't really work. Risk my life and maybe not even successfully terminate the pregnancy, and then have to go through with the carry the baby to term. And then I am stuck in another kind of a vicious cycle of keeping people in poverty. When poor people are having kids, it makes it much more difficult for them to get out of that rut, that vicious cycle. But we don't give a fuck. And we certainly don't fund the idea of child raising. We talk a good game about yeah, everyone should be having kids. Why are we not hitting the 2.5 repopulation mark anymore? We're in this danger zone where our population could actually go down. Fucking good. Good. Access to birth control, right? Is birth control covered by health insurance? I think it is not. Well, then don't have sex. Sure. Okay. One of us is certainly living in a fantasy world. And then, when you have privatized medicine, preventative care goes out the window. Treatment of disease becomes sort of what is the path of least resistance, possibly the path of least effectiveness. Preventative care out the window. Treating diseases in the cheapest way, which usually the cheapest way is the best way, right? You can't, and we can't underestimate the importance of mental health here. It is really sociopathic to say that no matter what your circumstances, you need to be strong enough to withstand the urge to have a drink. Look, you need to be able to work 2 jobs, minimum wage, have to live with roommates, in your 30s, don't have health care, your girlfriend's pregnant, but oh my, don't you let that get to you enough that you smoke a cigarette. Because if you do that, well, you were asking for it. People talk about champagne socialists. I would talk about the, see, champagne would be the wrong beverage. It'd be like a prime, but with alcohol. Something like that. It'd be an influencer drink with alcohol. That would be the beverage. It'd be prime prime right-wing ideologues. You deserved diabetes. So we're not covering your insulin. And Martin Shkreli is going to make a mint. Those stupid Canadians paying for insulin. All kinds of medication acts. It's not just that, right? Narcan, right? Because why are we going to supply Narcan? Like, why do we want to save the lives of drug addicts, regardless of whether or not we push them into that corner or not? EpiPens, right? If you're so weak that you're allergic to stuff and then you eat it anyway, or you go to a restaurant, say, where their standards of quality are not high enough that they were able to eliminate all vestiges of pine nuts from the food they prepared, and you went into anaphylactic shock, that's on you, buddy. It's a sad state of affairs. I'm sure most people who are listening right now are familiar with the Tuskegee study. But in case you're not, let me read you a bit about it. This is from the CDC itself. In 1932, the USPHS, working with the Tuskegee Institute, began a study to record the natural history of syphilis. It was originally called the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male, but it's now referred to as the USPHS Syphilis Study at Tuskegee. I think that's a good rebrand. Good rebrand there. Sounds a lot more innocuous than. The study initially involved 600 black men, 399 who had syphilis, 201 who did not have syphilis. Participants' informed consent was not collected. Researchers told the men they were being treated for bad blood, a local term used to describe several ailments, including syphilis, anemia, fatigue. In exchange for taking part of the study, the men received free medical exams, free meals, and here's the capper, burial insurance. They paid for their funerals. So kind. So kind. So they did not get consent, and they infected 201 people with syphilis and willingly did not properly treat the rest of them. By 1943, penicillin was the treatment of choice for syphilis and became widely available. But the participants in the study were not offered treatment. So you're in this study, and penicillin is widely known to be a treatment for the disease that you have. You're not being told that you're getting penicillin, but you're not being told that you're not getting penicillin. So in 1972, the year I was born, an Associated Press story about the study was published, and as a result, the Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs appointed an ad hoc advisory panel to review the study. The panel concluded that the study was ethically unjustified. That is, the results were disproportionately meager compared with the known risks to human subjects involved. In October of 1972, the panel advised stopping the study. This was happening 50 years ago. And this is on the cdc.gov website. So this is admitted to by the CDC. This is not some conspiracy or something that people are thinking might have happened. This is what the CDC is saying did happen. Let's do the CDC a solid and say that they tell the truth 62% of the time, and that they are transparent about 62% of the things that they do. I think that's being generous. Let's now imagine the other 38% of the experiments that have been run. Again, socioeconomic strata, targeting the poor, because who's going to miss the poor? This was happening in 1972. I was alive when this was happening. Yeah, for a month. I was a month old when they stopped doing this. In 1973, a class action lawsuit was filed, and the families got $10 million out of court between, 600 people? And then in 1997, Bill Clinton issued a formal presidential apology for the study. I'm sure that carried a lot of weight. So it's very difficult for me to realistically entertain any sort of notion that the United States government works on the behalf of or for the betterment of the poor in light of these things. And there are more, right? But going on 2 hours here of talking about these lovely actions that we've taken and ignoring the chat at this point, because clearly have some misguided people in there. Not to, yeah, there is that. I mean, there's nothing in the grand scheme of things, but the irony that, like, the richer you get, the less you actually have to pay for, because we idolize and celebritize the rich and the famous, right? Because they represent that hope for us all, and that's exactly what the shadowy conclave wants them to represent. The shadowy conclave wants us all to have that hope somewhere in the back of our heads that if we work hard enough, we try hard enough, we'll get there. Because that way we keep trying until one day we get cancer. Because we grew up in Flint, Michigan, and we drank contaminated water. Or we get cancer from living underneath a nexus of high tension wires. Hundreds of cancer clusters in the US. But you're not going to find any in Beverly Hills. Nantucket. All right, I am going to look at the comments now, just because. Yeah. I agree with this, Steve. Yeah. All right. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. Says the only country in the world yet to be able to figure this out. Oh man, and right in the shadow. Look at this. Vicar and Sleeper, you guys are on the same brainwave. You got the very same neuron firing. Same talking point you got there. Well, I mean, I agree with this. I mean, as I said, like at the beginning of this, like I feel like all of our collective goals should be make things better. Unless we actually think this is the best we can do. If you think this is the best we can do, then I guess I feel bad for your lack of vision. Funny. I wonder how many jokes like this you're going to tell. Oh, keep going. All right, let's go. All the way down to the bottom here. It's very easy to avoid the criminal justice system when you don't break the law. Okay. Really? Okay, so is it when you don't break the law, or is it when you hang out with the wrong crowd? And do you honestly believe this? So what do you think happened, say, let's say in Sanford, Florida? What do you think happened there? What do you think happened to Trayvon Martin? What do you think of no-knock warrants? Do you think the police should be able to just break into your home based on flimsy evidence in the middle of the night, guns drawn? People steal essentials all the time. This happens all the time. Give you a single example. Thousands of examples. Hundreds of thousands of examples. People dumpster dive for essentials all the time. They wait outside Dunkin' Donuts for people to throw out the remainder of that day's baked goods. Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, I think the death penalty should be abolished. Wow. Okay. All right. I got you, Vicar. Are you ever going to have sex in your life? Do you think you might ever get yourself in a position where you have a child without meaning to? Do you think you might you realize that when you have a child, it's, 18 years of support? Can you envision a situation wherein you are very able to pay child support, But then let's say you slip on the ice and break your back. Hopefully. And you're no longer able to work. What about then? I mean, I agree with this. Terrible for both. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, good. Thank you for clearing this up. So crack was, you were given harsher sentences for crack to help the black community, right? That's very similar to a regressive tax system where it's basically like, we got to tax the hell out of the poor so that they don't want to be poor anymore, so that they can get rich. We need to give them an incentive to get rich. And that incentive is we tax the fuck out of them with regressive taxes. Well, somebody doesn't. What does this have to do with anything? Volkswagens were founded to try and help Germany win the war. They're good cars now. Like, if you're gonna blame an institution for the beliefs of its founder, then what are we fucking doing? George Washington owned slaves. What are you talking about? I don't want to just concentrate on these two people, but I'm not 51. I'm 50 for another couple of weeks. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, this is nuts. Yeah, well, I was going to be reading the chat, but when it was being dominated by people saying the same thing over and over again, I wanted to at least get through what I had planned to get through before looking at this stuff. It's true. It's just it's an occupational hazard. A lot of people talking about how old I am. Great. I am fucking old. I'll admit I steal for fun. When I steal, it's for fun. Generally from particular companies, I will steal from. Yeah, Amber. Completely true. Do you want me to look up the incidence of people stealing bread? Like, is this genuinely an argument you want to make? That people do not steal essentials? That's the argument you want to make? What gets called out are the luxuries, because those are the high ticket items, and also they don't garner as much sympathy. But do you want me to look up that data? Oh, thank you. They're my guitar playing nails. I'm not almost 50. I am 50. Yeah, exactly. Dude, man, you're not doing like it is a crock to say that uh, by being more first of all, prison is not reformist, is punitive, is not reformist. So it doesn't even matter. Well, okay, so Malachi, right? What is the alternative? Is what you're saying, right? Not the opposite. What's the alternative here? I don't know what the alternative is. I'm pointing out some areas in which I believe, and many others believe, what we are doing is creating a faux egalitarian society that is, in fact, not egalitarian at all, but much closer to authoritarianism than we'd like to think. We just do it in a very underhanded, slimy way. And I'm like not one of the, well, depending on when you get me, not necessarily one of those people calling for revolution. I feel like reform could happen. It's never going to get to where it should be. And I do think, like I said, if we were starting from zero, if we were starting from a blank slate and we had empathetic people trying to come up with a system that polices itself, we could do better than we've done. But it's like evolution, man, right? Like once you've developed your bisymmetry and your head and your limbs, you're not going to all of a sudden develop a fourth arm or third arm. It's not going to happen. Once you've gone down like a road a certain amount, there's no going back unless you start over. I'm not talking about no more references to my age. Oh my God. Everybody's talking about my age. Okay, well, you seem very sure of this, Vim Boltonover, and you are absolutely wrong. But you seem very sure of yourself. My favorite type of thing to steal. Is this incriminating? I like to steal things that give me plausible deniability. But they're generally from companies that I feel like are deserve it. It just makes me feel like a little bit, I don't know, makes me feel a little thrill. Did that 50-year-old guy just steal that thing there? No way. He wouldn't do that. Look at him hobbling around. No way he stole something. I do like sometimes being. Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, I'm just saying it can be better. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, well then we do anarcho-syndicalism or anarcho-communism. If that's the case. Oh, good. I still got 27 years. Yeah. Okay. I saw this. That is good. All right. So to sum it up, capitalism's bad. We shouldn't lose hope, and we shouldn't fall down right-wing rabbit holes of self-improvement that rely on this idea that we all have the power within us to overcome whatever it is that we're facing, and that everybody is given a seat at the table, and if they don't dig in enough, then that is their fault, because clearly 100% not the case. We have, a runaway, spiraling, exponential problem of the divide between the rich and the poor, and it's getting worse and worse. Eventually, even though we've built in these tenebrous sort of like tendrils of social fabric that keep us bound in one way or another, eventually there will be a tipping point, and maybe hoping for some kind of common ground, some kind of compromise whereby we're all equally unhappy. And I don't like to really talk about things in this sort of dichotomous way where it is just conservatives and liberals or, whatever. And yet, that seems to be the way the country is right now, or that seems to be the very visible minority. And I do think it's like a minority, and I think the popular vote bears that out. But it is a very visible minority because, as people mentioned here before, right, there are certain types of views and stands that get clicks, or that people watch, or that people want to believe, or that extremely naive people do believe. I don't think capitalism is not great in the same sense that democracy isn't great. I think there is a line to be drawn between capitalism and democracy. But no, a socialist monarchy would not be the alternative that I would propose. I didn't come here with answers. I came here to pose questions. And now that I've posed them, maybe we can think about them and come up with a grand solution. And look, like I said, I'm having a kid shortly. I would like for that kid and my other kids to live in a world That's it. I would like for the world to exist. I would like for them to be able to live in it. And I would like for us as a people to take some, not get so defensive when it comes to taking some accountability for things. I feel like there's this pendulum that is swinging back and forth. And right now it is swinging away from empathy. It was swinging towards empathy. And then it feels like when COVID hit, we all kind of went a little nuts, and coming out of that cave has been difficult. And a lot of us have come out of that cave not having seen light for a long time. And just about anything looks good. Certainly sounds good if it sounds or feels self-empowering. So there's nothing like, a self-empowering self-help. I don't want to come across as it's Ravi. Oh my God. Vivek Ramaswamy. Sorry. Well, I don't know about you, but I would. I don't know about Ryan B. I feel like in any system where we're, say, for instance, providing a social safety net for the poor, there are always going to be people who are taking advantage of that, just like there are people at the top taking advantage of their power. The difference is the people taking advantage of welfare at the bottom, which most people are not, but the people who are taking advantage of welfare at the bottom don't have the ability to destroy the entire system by accumulating 99.1% of the wealth. They just don't have that ability. Oh man. Yeah, see, this is where I was getting my Elder Scrolls hat was on. I agree with this too. And we're probably not so far apart on a lot of things. Well, yeah, this is true. Something's gonna happen there. Ain't gonna be pretty. It ain't gonna be fun. It is gonna be hot. Just remember, money ain't gonna cool the earth down. And I didn't have this on. Damn it. I wanted to do this. Oh, that's not right either. It's not working for me tonight. No, that ain't it. All right, forget it. Everybody have a good night. I love you all. I hate you all. And let's hope that 10 years from now, we're still around.